Jagex just finished a live stream on the new boss dungeon update, and in this video I'm going to cover all the details so you're up to speed. Whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Let's get started. Now, usually we get information on new content a couple weeks prior to the release in a live stream or news post, but this time we're getting involved early. Like, properly early. And best of all, we can actually have an impact and have a say in how the content is going to be formed. The new boss dungeon is going to be part of the Sanctum of Rebirth, which is this massive upside down pyramid shown in a previous concept art. Note that this is the entirety of the Sanctum of Rebirth, although the actual boss dungeon is only a part of the area. The dungeon will not have any trash mobs, however it will feature multiple bosses with their own special drops, just like Elite Dungeon 2.
Each boss in the dungeon will give you loot. So it's a bit more like ED2 in that there is loot from each boss versus like ED1 or 3 where there is not. I'm adding that. What do people think of it? And also the ED concept of group scaling, boss drops is too rare in groups. That is not a thing here. How do you feel? You turn up with your friends, have a good time, get drops.
In terms of the difficulty of these bosses, they're going to be suited for mid to high level players.
So we're looking primarily towards the mid to high end player, so those of you who are already familiar with Elite Dungeons, but we want everyone to get involved. So strictly speaking, if you've not yet gone into combat for a reason, we kind of want this to be what entices you in.
Now, how exactly do the mods or developers intend to get players that aren't into PvM into PvM? Examples mentioned include designing the boss arena in a way where a single tile is represented as an actual single part, like the golden line in this boss arena. Or mechanic telegraphing, where you're able to see a visual cue charge up like a box, the example mentioned, on the floor expanding to a certain point at which the mechanic is launched at you. A third example mentioned include an adrenaline bar charging up for attacks instead of you having to count ticks.
Looking at things like possibly adding an adrenaline bar above the NPC to state like how long until it does a special attack. So you can't necessarily count it out, but a lot of people say, oh yeah, just count to 5 or count to 3 and then they're going to do a special attack. So there's a bit more visual indicator.
These are all good signs. I'm curious to see what actually makes it into the live game once this update releases. Also, here's a sneak peek of one of the Sanctum of Rebirth bosses, which looks to be some kind of Tusker-like enemy. Based on this other image shared, it seems that this Tusker-like boss is going to have 2 different phases, as you can see 2 different platforms. The mods also introduced a new death system as a proposal for this new boss dungeon, where the encounter is essentially for everyone, but money per hour is based on how good you are. What they actually proposed, and this isn't final as you're able to give feedback, is that in normal mode, not hard mode, even though it may come to hard mode, but probably isn't and isn't part of the plan currently, if you die, you fall over and essentially can't do anything for 30, 40, 50 seconds, and then you essentially respawn.
Time is the cost. That is the penalty.
During the stream, the mods also touched upon being able to AFK bosses, and it seems that the general consensus is that unless it's a high-level boss, they don't really care. As for this new boss dungeon, though, it seems that Mod Sponge isn't worried about people AFKing the content, perhaps because it's too hard to AFK due to the mechanics, or that just, they see it as some kind of mid-tier boss.
I think with the designs of the encounters in this content, AFK is a concern. I think that's how I'd word it. I'm not worried about players AFKing this content.
Now, we already knew this, but these bosses are going to be dropping brand new T95 dual-wield magic weapons, and you're going to be able to get your hands on what these could become in a beta starting on the 30th of May until the 6th of June. This is pretty cool because players are being involved in testing for a weapon we're going to be getting very soon. For people that don't know, combat betas are essentially an extra client or world where you have a clone of your account and you can claim weapons for free and put perks on them and everything. Everything stays in the beta, so you're not going to be able to bring anything from the beta into the main game. Now, the weapons themselves in the beta will be using placeholder models, and the effects themselves, of which there are 3, are very much subject to change.
Things like passive effects, the names, anything, by all means, just give us the feedback. I will reiterate it because I think it's important, because we had it a lot in the combat beta previously where people said, oh my god, they're changing this, and it's what you see is a completely just an option. We might do none of it.
They did share the concept art for the T95 weapons though, so here's an idea of what they're going to look like. It's worth noting that these T95s won't be dyeable on release, but it is shown on the concept art to give you a general idea of how it could look. Now I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the 3 different passives, although it's also worth noting that there will be a special attack attached to these weapons, but it will not be designed until the set effect passive has been picked and finalized.
The current plan is for them to have special attacks as well, but we don't want to design those until we kind of know what set effect we're going with.
The first variant has non-basic abilities, so thresholds and ultimates, generating 2 stacks of Insatiable, where basic abilities consume these stacks, increasing adrenaline gain by 25%. Again, these numbers are subject to change. They don't really care about feedback on the power. They want feedback on the feel of these weapons, as numbers can easily be changed.
Easy to make something more or less powerful. It's much harder to get the feel right. So we very much want your feedback more on the feel than the power.
The second variant does the exact same thing, except there's a little bit of randomness to fully refresh wild magic, which might work very nicely with Greater Chain. But the effect is going to be very similar. You're going to be able to use wild magic in between your other thresholds far more often with these magic weapons. Now the third variant is your damage over time or bleed build weapon type, if you will. Damage over time abilities will deal 30% more damage, so right now that's only Combust and Corruption Blast, but that could also be something like Magma Tempest, depending on feedback. With the set, your damage over time abilities generate Essence Corruption with each hit. Based on your stacks, your damage over time abilities have a 30% chance to empower, dealing the damage instantly and refreshing their cooldown. Now that sounds interesting. With 25 corruption stacks, you'll deal bonus damage against enemies, depending on your stacks and magic level. With 50 corruption stacks, basic abilities generate an additional 3.6% adrenaline over 6 seconds, so there's a overtime generating ability. Now you might have also noticed that weapons take 9 seconds to charge after equipping, so in other words for their effects to work. This is the mod's attempt to play around with reduced switchscape because they want these weapons to be a solid standalone weapon set.
We want players to get a feel for the weapons as a soul item, not I'm going to for soul, then I'm going to switch to these for one cycle and start doing my thing. We want these weapons to feel nice, standalone. So there very much is a chance we'll pull charging off, but we want these to feel good as they are without just being a switch weapon.
Another unrelated note is that the mods are also going to be playing around with some magic abilities in this beta, and it might not release at all. It's very provisional as Mod Holy calls it, but it is going to be tested. In the beta, Greater Sonic Wave and Magma Tempest will be dual-wield abilities, and Greater Concentrated Blast will be a two-hand ability. The reason being is that the FSOA is a crit weapon, and it's kind of weird how you switch the dual-wield after using it. Well, you know, Mod Ryan put it perfectly. Let's roll the clip.
It makes sense at a high level, but if you just assume like your average player buys a Fracture Stuff Armadillo and they want to use their crit ability and they realize they can't, it doesn't make much sense.
Or perhaps in the future it might not be style specific at all.
Maybe. I'm not saying we will. Again, everything is subject to change. What if Greater Conk is actually just viable? It's not weapon locked. You can use it with dual wield and two hand.
I really like that we're feeling that extra bit of communication from Jagex, and it truly seems that we as players are being taken into that development cycle and process to make sure we get the updates we want. You love to see it, and I love covering a good bit of positive news. This will set a new standard, and I hope Jagex is going to be able to uphold that standard going into the future. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it interesting. If you did, leave a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.